Hello, and welcome to Module 4, Openstack Deployment. As we prepare to deploy Openstack, it's important for us to understand what the Openstack prerequisite is. There's a number of different features and functions that we're going to rely on in deploying our Openstack environment. There's a number of service dependencies that are a simple checklist to follow. Usually these are packaged in a lot of builds when we look at the traditional sort of virtualization hypervisors, but as we go into our OpenStack environment, a lot of times we're having to do a little bit of this building ourselves. And even if we don't, it's good for us to understand what's happening a little under the covers so we know how to support it better. Firstly, you're going to require a host operating system. That's a good place to begin. And then the next layer is we're going to require a database service. Most commonly, we're going to see MySQL used, partly because it's open source. It's also freely available as an open source platform, and it's also widely used in general. There are also high availability options for it, which is really great. As we get into our advanced courses in high availability OpenStack, you're going to see how to leverage those great tools that are out there to build a better, more resilient OpenStack cloud. We also need a message queuing service. So our MQ service that we're going to see most often, again, doesn't have to be every time, but quite often we're going to use RabbitMQ, a great open source option, which is, again, widely used by a number of different products and platforms as a great, resilient message queuing environment. And of course, not just all of those upper layers, but recall this is effectively like that service provider layer in an infrastructure as a service model. We're also going to need layer 2 and layer 3 networking in order to service our OpenStack cloud. Another quick tip we have along the way here, OpenStack uses what we call a type 2 hypervisor model. Whereas type 1 is a hypervisor that's layered directly on the hardware layer, such as vSphere or Citrix Xen. This is the next layer where we have type 2, where our hardware layer and then a middle tier operating system layer, and then the hypervisor is deployed inside that operating system, and then the guest OSs lie above that. So again, this is where the type 2 comes from, is that we're going to deploy an operating system onto the bare metal platform, and then we push our hypervisor inside it. The hypervisors that we most often see are going to be KVM and Xen, and those are type 2 hypervisors for the most part. In our bare metal deployment, you may recall all those big servers that we talked about before. This is, as you can imagine, exactly the same. We use a physical hardware model. We push all of our components onto these hardware layers. And the good thing is, even in small environments, you can co-locate some of those services. But the advantage with the way that OpenStack has been built is there's great scale-out capabilities in almost every one of the projects out of the box. And if not, there's also great tools and techniques in order to make this entirely scalable across a wide platform. If you're not going to go with a bare metal deployment, we can use a virtual deployment. Typically, you're going to see this more in smaller environments, or perhaps even in lab environments, and we'll talk about that right now as to why we do that. So first we have our traditional hardware model, in this case whether it's a desktop, a small server, even a laptop like I have running on mine. We run a hypervisor on top of it, say VMware Workstation or VirtualBox. Then inside there we have our virtual environment where we deploy all of our OpenStack services and endpoints into these virtual nodes inside our hypervisor that's at that bottom layer. Now, this could be as large as you want. In fact, you could actually do nested deployments across large hardware platforms, but typically you wouldn't do that, except in lab environments. That's why, as I said, nested virtuals are a great way for us to test features out and functions and be able to test out our orchestration and other tools that we're going to use. It allows for us to use multiple environments by leveraging the existing hypervisor. And what I mean there is we could have 6, 7, 8, 10, who knows how many environments, depending on how much disk space and network space we actually use. They're all isolated from each other, by those layer 2, layer 3 boundaries underneath the hypervisor. So again, in lab environments, these are really great ways to deploy them, so we can test out different ways of managing and tweaking how our OpenStack build is going to go. It was kind of a quick module, but effectively, that's the two type of deployments that we deal with. It will go much deeper into how we deploy the components down the road, but in the meantime, we needed to understand what those basic requirements are and how it's going to go both in hardware or nested virtual deployments. So again, remember, it's a type 2 hypervisors that we're going to run inside, and then our OpenStack framework is going to run inside that operating system, and that's where we're going to run all of our services. Now, it's time to move on and check out our next module.